and we're going to talk about some fun stuff today. It might annoy and upset a few people, but remember, we all just have difference of opinions and different life experiences. It's not something to get upset over, even when we disagree. And I think it's just best that we talk things out. So I want to give you my perspectives on some of the things that are in the news right now, and it's pretty wild what's going on. So, good morning. Oh, everybody's slowly starting to come in, and I'm running right now. I haven't figured out how to do this on Substack because there's no RMTP, but I have this little splash screen with music that's going on to the main feed. Well, not the main feed, but the free feed. And I'm doing this because I think I mentioned this on a previous stream. It's kind of nice that there's so many tools now, and if you know music, even if you don't know music, but I think it's better if you know music, that you can use these AI tools to to create music, and which is what I've done with this one. And all lyrics, chord progression, structure, all that sort of stuff is kind of my thing. And once you learn how to prompt it, it's pretty amazing. So if I figure out how to do that on Substack as an intro, I will. And I had somebody message me already and saying they love the idea that just a 5 minute window to start, but maybe that's going to be opportunity for us to engage people on Substack, for us to engage ahead of the more I guess public feeds. People are not necessarily subscribed to this platform and are just in because there's a larger percentage of people on YouTube and Rumble and whatever who aren't actually subscribers who end up stumbling across a feed. It happens with all my podcasts that there's a high percentage that aren't here, whereas here in Substack is very different because we're all kind of in the same sort of ecosystem. So, anyways, if anybody has any questions or ideas, throw them up in the chat. I've got the window expanded so I can see some of your comments. I'll be able to scroll through them a little bit later. And if there's anything particular you just want to say, disagree, agree, just don't do the all capital things and, call me names like, that happened to Scott quite frequently. So anyways, all right, let's finish off the last 25 seconds here. And then we're going to shift over. And if anybody is in Discord and you can see this, then let me know because I think I've made this live stream room public. All right, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think we can. Are we switched over? Wait, no. There we go. There we go. All right. It's always going to be duct tape and glue. It's the duct tape and glue presentation, but that's kind of the way I like it. If you watch my other podcast tonight, Not on Record, is at 8 o'clock. That is much more polished, and we have an ABC camera set up, and editing and production and all that sort of stuff. But we don't need any of that fancy stuff here, right? Like we can just be a little rough around the edges and just kind of come on in and get together and talk to one another. And oh, by the way, if you have your mug and you have your coffee, I think we can toast our country that apparently has discovered its national identity when it's convenient. And we can toast to this. This is my toast, and some of you might have heard it before, and some of you might be the first time. This is the toast, the Canadian land acknowledgement, and it goes like this. We'd like to gently acknowledge that we're standing on the traditional land of, well, whoever was here and was savagely killing each other at the time. Anyway, they're not in charge anymore. We're here until the Americans take over. Sip. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the best Sunday of your life. I hope it's gonna be the best Sunday though. It's your best Sunday of your life today. That I can guarantee. Please like, share, and subscribe. And emphasis on the share thing. And a number of you have been doing that. And thank you, Beth. Beth, casual, lifting, encouraging, always enjoyable. Beth, you are wonderful. And I haven't restructured the setup right now that I can see the locals memes yet, but I'm going to try to do that for next week. I actually have one I'm going to discuss on Friday already because I've had to shift things over because a bunch of things have happened. But we'll get to that in a second. Did y'all check out Old Texas Paul? Old Texas Paul, sitting there with his cowboy hat and his mug, and talking about how he believes in collectivism and doesn't really like Trump. You know, it's communism in a cowboy hat. Mm, it's the phenomenon of the fake MAGA copycats on the left, who are going to try to co-opt populism, which is why you see some of the silliness amongst what we call the woke right. That's the populist wave they're trying to bring over. Um, Beth, please still send over the graphic. Thank you, sweetheart. So, anyways, the this was the video we discussed yesterday, posted on Twitter and on Substack, on Substack Notes, of Old Texas Paul just lounging down, lounging around on the porch, relaxing, watching the tumbleweeds go by, and talking about how he likes communism without saying the word. So very interesting. Got a comment on Substack Notes from AHNC underscore hat. What a great name. And I really appreciate this. This is why, you know, and when we come together and you share stuff with me, you make me smarter. And I like to be surrounded by people who are smarter than I am. So I really appreciate you out there. And he says to me, he posts this on in response on Substack Notes. He says, I can say this much, that referring to Old Texas Paul, which is basically a propaganda op. He says, that is a brand new hat. It has no scuff marks, no oil stains on the crown from lifting the hat off and on. The hat is pristine. I've worn cowboy hats for years, and none of them, even the newer ones that are black, are without any marks showing they get used regularly. So there you go. You know, it's the equivalent of when politicians want to show that they're breaking ground and their staff goes out and buys a shovel and a high visibility vest, and they've never used either, and they don't know how to use the shovel, and they put it backwards and stuff like that. That's old Texas Paul's doing. He's probably an IT manager somewhere that's putting on a fake accent and a cowboy hat. So I thought that's very interesting. So thank you for the comment. I appreciate it. Um, I'm also, just a couple of things to clean up. We are, I think, streaming in the Discord right now. This is an ongoing test. So don't worry about joining the Discord right now if you want to see that. But this is for things that are going to be happening in the future. So Jesse or whoever's in the Discord right now, if you can see me, let me know, because I think I changed the properties to allow you to see me. And as well, there's a growing listener base on Spotify, which I love. I love the fact that we can have the people watching video in real time and the people who go on Spotify. And you can also watch on Spotify, but you can also listen on Spotify, which is kind of the primary goal of that. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everything should be available there. And if you are a listener as opposed to viewer, please let me know. I want to hear from you. So I've been posting these articles and just trying to get you all familiar with kind of the setup and infrastructure. bjdichter.substack.com. Articles go there. National Telegraph, sometimes into the Daily Bell, sometimes into Zero Hedge. And you can see the articles there. I'm going to work on something for next week. We have something I think Thomas is prepared that he's going to be sending in the next day or so to me about Thomas is a university student. And so he's dealing with the woke nonsense on campus. And I thought it'd be very advantageous for all of us to understand what university students are actually going through, and not projecting what we think they are going through, living in this proto-commie age. So, and then you get a copy of Honking for Freedom, which is, if you can do it this time, getting better, right there. honkingforfreedom.com. Yeah, there's the title. You can get Honking for Freedom at honkingforfreedom.com. And so that's where we're going with stuff. So first I like to talk about funny or positive stuff. Uh, AI, which is very important in my opinion. And I've said here before, we all need to get to comfortable with AI and being able to use it. Came across this thing that was fascinating yesterday. I forget the name of the channel. This was, the before I go to bed viewing, and which I often get criticized by people by for some reason they say, I don't know, I can't turn off. I don't know, I just like to learn things. And what better time is there to learn stuff than when you're just about to go to sleep and relax, right? So there was this video. I'll post a link somewhere when I'll find it after the stream. And it's titled Scientists Trapped 1,000 AIs in Minecraft. They created a civilization. So this is pretty wild. Minecraft, for those of you who don't have kids and don't know, it's basically a world simulator. It's a world building simulator that's designed more for children and family friendly, that sort of stuff. And you might have seen the images of it online, the kind of block people in this world. And what they've done is they set up 1,000 LLMs and they gave it a simple instruction and told them to play Minecraft. And the simple instruction, because remember, Minecraft is a world builder, so you can build your own world. So it's very good for children, right? Think of like, I don't know, a scaled down version of City Skylines. Might be a good way of looking at it. Not scaled down, but a more simplistic. So they set these 1,000 AI agents into Minecraft. And there's 3 research papers. I think it was MIT that was doing this, if I'm not mistaken. And the LLMs were given one short instruction. And the instruction, I'm going to paraphrase because I was looking for it to write it down again because, again, it was last night and I just couldn't come across it quickly. The instruction was play Minecraft and build an efficient civilization. That's it. Just something like that. No instructions beyond that. So very, very vague. And you'd think, well, how is a computer going to interpret this, right? Well, in its quest to make an efficient civilization, it did. And it started making unique characters. Like there are attributes that were created around some of the characters. But it decided to basically emulate what we do and how humans behave. And that's important. I'm going to get to that in a second. It was wild. You could see it started to segment civilization into different specialities and different interests. There are AIs that started forming relationships and they started dating each other in this alternate world. There's certain AIs that got interested in design and started creating art. There are other ones that just sorted things out. There was one AI. There was a treasury that they built. One AI decided that it was just going to be on guard permanently 24/7, guarding the treasury to make sure no other AIs robbed or stole the AI. So it started making all these decisions. Like, how does an AI decide it wants to date another AI? How does that happen? Does this mean AI they are making decisions? And yes, they are, without any instructions to do so. They were not told to be making making any of these complex decisions that human beings make, yet it started to do so. And a lot of people are kind of blown away by that. I'm not, and I'll tell you why. This is, as Scott Adams would call it, the hypnotist lens of understanding the human being operating system and how we function. And this is going to be related to other stuff that we're talking about later on today. Human beings are shockingly predictable. This is something that the tech world has understood for some time. This is how Facebook and, Twitter, X, they have developed these algorithms that can manipulate us or persuade us into building up addictive tendencies. It's because we're very predictable. We may think we're all very special and unique, and in some ways we are. But our behavior patterns They are very predictable, and they're informed by the environment that you grow up in. And one day I'll tell some, personal stories specifically on that. It might be a little too early right now. So what we're seeing is we're seeing the language that AI manages is also predictable. So how LMs work, I think everybody knows at this point. It's just an algorithm that predicts the probability of the next word in a phrase. And we are very predictable in our behavior. We use a certain subset of words and phrases throughout our day and throughout our life. And we may think it's unique, but we're quite predictable. So I think all you're seeing is the LLMs through language know how to mimic human behavior. And if they know how to mimic human behavior because they're experts in human language for communication, then of course it's going to start behaving exactly like a human being. And anybody who's, trained in this particular area of human communication, I think would understand that this is the very, very predictable outcome. If you're not, then it might seem shocking, and that's when people get scared. And oh, is this a conscious mind? Is this the singularity? No, it knows how to predict our language, and if it predicts our language, it knows what words we're using, and the words inform our behavior, and then it uses that to mimic our behavior. I am streaming in Discord, but I can't click on it to view. Okay, well, we're making progress. We're making progress, Beth. At least it's streaming. We'll figure that out for next week. Anyways, so you check out that video. Scientists trapped 1,000 AIs in Minecraft. Very well done video. It's only 10 minutes or so, and it's very interesting. But the only thing I would add to it is the predictability of human behavior is not factored in the analysis of those research papers, of 3 research papers. Next on AI, a related topic as well. This is a very interesting article on the account, I think was AI Disruption. I found this on Bluesky, which is how I refer to Blue Sky, which is the proto-commie Twitter. And it's really funny to go there. You see like Tesla takedown and all this sort of stuff. It's just maniacs. It's kind of funny. But anyways, there is often some good stuff, usually in the tech related field as well. And this was interesting. The article reads, the title of the article is AI Needs Electricians. 300% pay boom for 300% pay boom. And then it goes on to explain that the big tech is poaching energy pros and electricians and bringing them into the AI world to work in these data centers as they're being constructed amid the global electricity crunch, right? So there is a growing demand, a significant growing demand for electricians, the trades. Did you anticipate that? I remember thinking, is that going to be the case? And I was also thinking in terms of, construction people, civil engineers, construction engineers, that sort of thing. And it's pretty wild. I think that's actually a sign of positivity that this whole AI infrastructure that is being built that is very important, and the U.S. government's hyper focused on this right now. There's somebody in Intel I know who's explained to me that this is like a primary goal of the U.S. government right now, and not just the U.S. government. That's why they're putting so much support behind AI data centers. That maybe this is a sign of optimism that the world needs electrical infrastructure and people who are specialized in those areas. So if you have children or you're going to raise children or whatever, and you're concerned about sending your kids to some woke brainwashing university, maybe you should send them to a trade school to be an electrician, right? Or an engineer or something to that effect. And I think that's a sign of optimism. And I think that's also something in the feather of the cap for the people who try to communicate. I think Jordan Peterson also communicated this, that not every child has to go to university and get an English lit degree, right? Well, you can actually, your children can get practical skills, practical skill sets. And so I hope this is something that trade schools will capitalize on in the future. I hope you liked Stanley Bridge. It is Stanley. It's totally Blue Ski. Go to Blue Sky. You will be calling it Blue Ski. It is the most proto-commie uh, craziness you've ever seen. I find it really entertaining. So I kind of post this stuff, and once in a while, somebody, it's mostly bots. There's, I don't know, 20 people. I'm exaggerating, but it's a very small handful of people that are in there, several thousands, but that's about it. And once in a while, they get a little crazy and they get upset. It's a riot. It's very funny to see what triggers people into that vaded state where they just can't control their emotions. And there's one that you gotta watch. They follow this hashtag Tesla takedown. All the green energy people who are just completely who are their whole worldview is so turned upside down because Elon Musk joined the Trump campaign that they are in permanent cognitive dissonance to an extreme degree. So much they're trying to just recruit as many people out to go out in the street and get Elon. I'm like, you're all the green energy people. What's the matter with you? It's so funny. I think it's wild. It's very entertaining. Yesterday discussed, for those of you who didn't see, you can go back and watch it. I promise it's not a waste of time, and I hope some of you enjoyed it. The How Intelligence Agencies Become Woke and Law Enforcement's Policies Role in that process. And I kind of mapped out the female cop trajectory, um, and how they go from, on the beat into being an analyst. And this is not my view. This is a view from many people within law enforcement who are experiencing it and don't know what to do about it and are very concerned about it. But did that analysis make sense? I think so. Because in a conversation when I was going through it with somebody, they know that I write articles as a journalist for a number of publications, and they thought this was something important for the public to be aware of, and the politicians all try to ignore it, and they enable it. And I think it's a very it's I don't think it's the only, by the way, it's not the only thing that's contributing to woke law enforcement and woke intelligence agencies, but it's one of a multi-varied process that enables this sort of behavior and the erosion of our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agencies, right? Anyways, and by the way, that was not a critique of female officers. Female officers can be very skilled, actually, in intel. This is why certain countries around the world, the one that slips people into cognitive dissonance, which is because they've been primed for it. The country of Israel. When you go to Israel, it's usually women who are in the military who are doing the screening and analysis of people. You see that in the TV show Fauda, which I highly recommend everybody watch. You don't have to like or hate or have an opinion on Israel to watch that show. It's fascinating. It's a fascinating show because both sides love that program. So that should tell you something. But anyways, and you'll see that in that TV show as well. It shows the role of women as analysts in intel, and that also is here as well. So that doesn't take this whole phenomenon doesn't take away from skilled women in law enforcement. The problem is the quotas, the forcing 30% or more of new hirees have to be women when there's a shortage of supply, and that's why you see the erosion of standards. So basically, as I explain, much of life. This is why Scott Adams was so brilliant. Law enforcement is just a Dilbert filter. You put the Dilbert filter on law enforcement, and all of this makes sense, and you can see how we end up having these catastrophic effects. And we saw that, as I mentioned yesterday, in the trucker convoy, when all of a sudden Twitter becomes the primary source for informing intelligence analysts where the national security threats are. And boy, did that blow up in the face of Mark Carney and blackface Trudeau in the last ruling for the Supreme Court, who ruled the exact opposite. And that's why this happens. So, Don Lemon, we discussed yesterday. And everybody loves Don Lemon. Uh, my only comment about Don Lemon being arrested, he was sitting pretty for a day. He's making speeches all over the U.S. is trying to rally the troops and get everybody excited about Don Lemon again. And you can see he's there. He's like, here's my big moment again. I'm gonna be a star. I finally got another job. And then all of a sudden, oops, Epstein files are released, and no one cares about Don Lemon anymore. So I guess he's just going to be arrested, and I don't know if he went to any sort of arraignment, but I don't see anybody caring or talking about Don Lemon anymore. That lasted, I don't know, a day. Beth says your analysis does make sense. Well, thank you very much. A bunch of people are posting stuff. I can't keep track of which is which. I see Beth here on locals. I can see the L, but anyways, it's difficult to that, and monitor them all at once, but I'll get better with this over time, I promise. This is a concept we've discussed on this, the couple of concepts we've discussed in previous streams. As you know, I was streaming semi-regularly before, once a week, and now I've structured my life that I can be here a few days a week for all of you, and we can start coming together and sharing ideas, which is why the locals is there, which is why Substack is there, and which is why Discord will be there. We'll figure out how to use that as well. And I do love hearing your opinions, and I do love when we disagree, but we at least hear each other out. And we may not agree on the conclusions, but we can agree on certain things are happening in the world. Just how it interprets our lives, we might view it a little bit differently, which is okay, which is great. That's fine. As long as we understand each other, then that's what ends the chaos, which is the frame I was trying to build around the trucker convoy. That, yeah, we don't have to agree 100%. And I remember having a Twitter space, this one particular one, with some school trustees from out west that were like NDP. And boy, we probably agreed on nothing. But, we at least heard each other out, and we agreed that we need to be able to talk to each other unfettered and unfiltered and be able to, like, get some thick skin. And we're going to say things we disagree with and not take it personally and just kind of work through things together. And I think that spirit is there, which is why we need to get politicians and the media out of our lives as much as possible. So, one of the concepts, and this is just such a perfect framing. This comes from Scott Adams. And I've shared this before. And boy, is this true, because I have used this so much in terms of communicating with people who I agree and disagree with. People I agree with on many things. You know how it is? You have somebody you agree with on everything. And then there's one thing they don't get, and you don't know how they can come to that conclusion. And it's infuriating. It makes you crazy. It's like, wait, we agree on absolutely everything. You agree with me on this, so how can't you be consistent on this? Well, that's just how we're wired, right? And Jimmy, I'm actually going to talk about that the next stream. What everybody gets wrong about Israel and Jeffrey Epstein. And I'll give I'm just, somebody had sent me so much stuff a while back, and I'm combing through it. Everything you've heard about Epstein and Israel's completely wrong. It's something else, and I'll be able to explain it later on. But I'll do that next stream, maybe on Friday or Saturday next week, because I'll be doing Friday, Saturday, Sunday next week as well. Anyways, so this framing of kind of working through and understanding when people get hostile with you, it's not within their control. It is subconscious. And this is, Scott would talk about the hypnotist filter, and anybody who else who's understood this will understand this is how we're wired. But the way he articulates it so simply and so efficiently, that was Scott Adams' particular skill. And maybe it comes from decades of drafting cartoons and being able to send a message in just one short phrase that could have multiple meanings. And maybe that's why he was so good at develop that skill. So this framing is called the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance. And those of you who watched Scott, you'll understand exactly what these are. But for some of you, it's new. And this is very important to understand. You'll see this often when you tell somebody something either they don't know, they disagree with. It's a new phenomenon. Take like the Tesla takedown people. And if you try to articulate what is it, you hate about Trump, or you can't hate everything about Trump. There's got to be one thing you agree with, right? So you try to have a respectful conversation with them. And what happens? You inevitably get to a point because they are so trapped in an ideological echo chamber, they're going to respond one of these 7 ways. And they are the number one is they're going to change the topic. And if you've tried to communicate to family members on issues that you disagree with, you will have experienced this as well. So the number one thing they do is they change the topic. Number two is the ad hominem. They attack you. Number three, mind reading. They're projecting what what he is actually saying. Oh, well, Donald Trump is really saying this. They'll respond with word salad. It'll just be Justin Trudeau is a perfect example. Everything that came out of his mouth was word salad. He's trapped into cognitive dissonance and he didn't understand what he was doing anyways. So it's just nonsense and nonsense after nonsense. Number five, they'll give you an analogy instead of a reason, not an analogy supporting a reason. Number six is too complicated to explain. Oh, you'll never understand it. You're just MAGA. You can't understand it. Or in the number seven strategy, famously, Jordan Peterson, Kathy Newman, the so you're saying straw man. Oh, so you're saying this and whatever. If you understand when you are going to interact with somebody who's trapped in an ideological echo chamber, by the way, it's not limited to the left. People on the right get trapped into ideological echo chambers as well. If you understand, they're going to respond in one of these 7 ways: change topic, ad hominem, mind reading, word salad, analogy instead of reason, too complicated to explain, or so you're saying straw man. Then you can be prepared of how to continue to disarm them. And the way you disarm them is with empathy, not by ridicule. It has to be legitimate empathy. And sometimes you have to end the conversation on a positive note and come back to them and use incrementalism, which is another persuasion strategy. But that's important. The 7 signs of cognitive dissonance. And when you or me or we are in a state of cognitive dissonance, most of us, we don't know that we're in that state, which is why it's so difficult. But anyways, that's another issue. Jimmy, we're going to talk about that next time. We're going to talk about it next time. Jimmy's very into the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, and I appreciate it. I'm not going to focus a lot on Epstein. Like, I'm going to talk a little bit about it here today. We'll get to it. This is not going to become the Epstein channel. I want to just take a pragmatic approach and just discuss things that people are not talking about it. Everybody can go in and read the emails and the files and all that sort of stuff. And that's done to death, and you can see that all over the web. I think we can just talk about kind of the cultural significance and, a lot more nuance and maybe how it relates to geopolitics, which it does sometimes. So the other thing, another concept that we've talked about, and I guess these things are kind of related to that's why I want to map it out, because they're kind of related to what we're going to talk about today and probably the next stream. And I think Beth would probably know, as would Jesse, but there's a delay. I'm going to ask, but I'll answer it because I don't want to wait 30 seconds for the delay. This concept of who are the least credible people in society. So this goes back about a year or so where we discussed this. And the 3 least credible people in society, broadly, are the media, politicians, and lawyers. And I always say lawyers with an asterisk because, they are a hired gun for somebody. They're there to regurgitate and refine an opinion from their client that may or may not be true. So media, politicians, and the lawyers, all of which who are incentivized to not tell you the truth. That's what, that's the same common denominator amongst all of them. And you're in big trouble when you're dealing with somebody who is 2 of the 3 or even all of the 3. There are certain people who are politicians, they worked in media, and they have a legal background. That's the last person who has credibility with anything they say, right? You also might add to people who have a background in PR, because public relations is trained lying. That's what PR is. PR is propaganda. It's the art of learning how to lie to people in a way that they'll be able to absorb the narrative or framing that you're trying to sell to them. It's very interesting. We can get into that in more detail in the future. But I think this is important. This is going to be important framing a little bit for today and more for future things to remember. Media, politicians, and lawyers, that's the least, they're all incentivized, often, not every time, but often incentivized to be deceptive. And if you have somebody that's two of the three or three of the three, then there should be major red flags anytime that person opens up their mouth. You have to look at all the context of what they're saying. And this is why when Scott talked about this frequently, he was so accurate. It's not the news that's important, that informs you of what's going on. And this you learn in politics very quickly. It's not what's happening, it's who's happening, who's behind it. In politics is very tribal, especially internal party politics. There's all these sorts of sub tribes. Why I just walk away with it and want nothing to do with it. I'll send information when it's relative, and people have information for me to get to the right people. I'll work with those people, but I just don't want to be part of a political party apparatus for this reason, because it's so tribal in this nature. So that's the other concept part of it. You need to not know the news. You need to know who is the news, who's behind it. You see this all the time in politics. Oh, yeah, who's supporting this person, right? You see this even in media when there's a bill. Oh, yeah, who's behind the bill? Because that will often tell you who's paying for the bill. That might be not in the best interest of that jurisdiction's citizenry. All right, so let's remember those two things. The 7 signs of cognitive dissonance. So I may say things about, I'm going to be pretty soft today, but I may see things around the orbit of the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. And if you find that you're getting angry, then you're in cognitive dissonance, because there's nothing I'm saying here that should make anybody angry. If you disagree, okay, great. But if you move from disagreement to actually getting angry, that emotional weighted state, that is a sign of cognitive dissonance, right? Um, yes, Jimmy will agreed. All right, so let's start with who was Jeffrey Epstein. And I think there's a lot that's inferred that is deceptive and incorrect. I'm going to try to be as charitable to all people as possible. And because I think we live in an era where the goal is nobody is charitable towards anyone. And that just causes us to go into different tribes because, okay, that guy is the enemy. Maybe not, I'm not, by the way, that's not advocacy for Epstein. He was garbage. There's no question. We know that. But who was he? Well, he was, for those who don't know, he was a financier, and a very, very successful financier, and questionable how he made all his money, because the trail to his wealth is very ambiguous and a little bit opaque. And the problem with opaqueness, and our political class just hasn't learned this. I can't believe how dumb they are sometimes. The problem with opaqueness is that causes the curiosity gap. And the curiosity gap is where conspiracies fill that gap, because people don't know. And we don't handle not knowing very well. That's why I discussed yesterday. I explained there's certain things that are just unknowable. And I'm cool with not knowing certain things that are unknowable. And if you are accepting of there are things sometimes that are unknowable, then you'll be less susceptible to it. Not completely, but whatever. So from what I know of Epstein, is he was a brilliant math protege. So everybody's, I've heard this a bunch of times. Well, how does this kid get to university and teaching a class and all that sort of stuff at such a young age without credentials? Simple. He was Rain Man. He apparently was absolutely brilliant with, for those of you who don't know the reference, the movie Rain Man with Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman. he was that brilliant at math. Apparently, he was, a savant on math, which is maybe why he was. I was watching this analysis earlier today from a psychologist explaining that Epstein didn't understand human motivation, and he was known for being very awkward and not understanding human beings. I think he was quite ill which wouldn't be un unusual for people of genius status, which apparently is what he was in the realm of mathematics. So that's why he excelled, and he went to, I think it was MIT was the university he taught at first. You correct me if I'm wrong. He taught when he was young and didn't have credentials. It's because he was absolutely brilliant. So, anyways, his trajectory apparently went towards the direction of finance, and he worked for a bunch of firms or a couple of firms, I guess Wall Street firms, if I'm not mistaken. I just know kind of tangentially from people who know of him or knew him and didn't like him, actually. People I know in Florida. And so he got into the finance world, but because he was unusually brilliant, and, Scott isn't the first person to talk about this. A lot of finance people talk about this. When you have a lot of experience in data analysis and you're good with math, you can look at a spreadsheet, a balance sheet. Accountants do this. They call it the numbers dance. You can see that number's wrong. I don't know why, but I can tell you that number's wrong. Start digging into that. Apparently, he had that, but at genius level for like extreme complexity. So that became very, very valuable to very wealthy people like Wexler, for example. You've heard his name frequently, but from people around the world of all stripes that apparently wanted access to his genius. Why? Well, apparently, I can't confirm this. It's just kind of what I'm explained from people who are in that world. He became the most brilliant financial bounty hunter. Do you know what that is? I mean, I by the title, I kind of understood, but I had somebody explain it to me. So many people in this world who are ultra wealthy or billionaires, mega millionaires, whatever you want to call it, and have businesses and multiple businesses around the world and all that sort of stuff, they are subjected to a lot of fraud. And a lot of people steal money from them, and they don't even know how people are stealing money and where the money is going. Apparently, that's quite frequent within that world. Like, I didn't know that, but okay, I guess that makes sense, right? If you and I are getting the Nigerian prince scam emails, could you imagine what somebody who is worth billions of dollars is being subjected to? And that would be more sophisticated. That's going to be people that they meet, I don't know, at the country club or whatever. And there are some famous cases about that. There was that TV show on CMNBC that I can't remember the name of it, but it was an investigative fraud program that talked about this phenomenon. That's very common, right? So he apparently was a financial bounty hunter, and he was so good at it. Like, he would find tens of millions of dollars that were impossible to find, but he had the skills to find it. Okay? Thought I didn't need too much detail. And that was the reason that everybody initially wanted access to him. That's how he got contact with the wealthiest and most influential people in the world, because he was this protege who can find their millions of dollars that are lost. Okay, well, so far, I can believe that. That makes sense. Is that accurate? I don't know. But it sounds logical. It sounds like how the world actually works, right? And look, I am not independently wealthy, but I know lots of people who are very wealthy and have most of my life. And I unfortunately was a sucker as a little kid who had to work on the weekends, but many of my friends did not and were from the wealthier class. So I kind of understand how that world works, and it's very different. I actually had that conversation during the trucker convoy with our idiot saboteur lawyers and some of our, quote, other leaders. I tried to explain to them very quickly when there was lots of money coming through. I said, look, this is political money. This is not going to a retail bank. This money needs a proper legal team. It needs somebody who understands Swift, somebody who is in the financial world, and probably a lawyer who understands that. Let's get a proper team who knows how to maneuver we'll call it VIP banking, because you're not just going to move these millions of dollars into your personal bank account. You need, I mean, Michael Saylor talks about this, why he loves Bitcoin so much, is because anytime he wanted to move like $50 million at a time, it would take a 2-hour long phone call and a team of lawyers and bankers on the phone with him to go through all the AML, KYC, regulatory bodies, Swift, and then it would still take, 2 weeks or a week, whereas Bitcoin it's instant. So I tried to explain it to some of these morons that this is how the world really works at that level. It is a different world. You're not familiar with it. I understand how that world works. We need people who are going to secure things, and we need a lawyer who's going to be the face of it, not a scam artist who's part of the political establishment that's also sabotaging the Alberta independence movement, which we'll talk about next time. I was going to talk about that today, but we'll talk about that another time. All right. So that's we let's take this thesis that this is the origin story of Jeffrey Epstein, that this was his value to wealthy people around the world. And what is there, 2,500 billionaires in the world? They don't all know each other, but many of them know each other. It's a different world, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. Maybe we'll talk about that another time, right? So, so let's get into the Epstein files a little bit without talking about the specific things, because you can all find it. And it's very, very interesting that it's frustrating at the same time. The political class wants people to stop falling victim to the curiosity gap that they create and believe in what they call conspiracy theories. But if you keep operating in this opaque manner and, I don't know, proving conspiracies are correct, then that's not going to give a lot of motivation for the people to abandon their conspiracies, because maybe it's correct. They see why people are falling into the bias because, hey, sometimes it's actually true, which seems to be the case here. And the worst part, and I think this is what angers people so much, is not only was this conspiracy going on, and the people who denied it knew it was going on, but then they gaslit all of you and say, no, 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 just like the left does. But they did it across the political spectrum. Don't believe your lying eyes. It's not happening. Well, it just then becomes a matter of defiance that people say, you know what, F you, I'm tripling down on this conspiracy theory, and now I'm going to go down the rabbit hole because I don't trust a word that you say. That class really needs to learn how to persuade people into their frame, and they have no idea. And here's like another example that you want to talk about things that fuel people following the rabbit hole down the curiosity gap. YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world on the internet. Okay, Google's the number one search engine. YouTube is actually number two. When you type into search, I was astonished by this. When you search in YouTube, the Epstein files, or an analysis of the Epstein files. Like, you just want to have somebody who's going to sit down and say, okay, here's this document. This is what this says. Is this true? Yes, no, maybe, we don't know. And just go through a proper analysis. But when you go to YouTube, the second largest search engine on the internet, and you type in anything about Epstein, do you know what you get? This is bad for Trump. It's all about Trump. I'm not asking about Trump. I'm asking about Epstein. and I want a critical analysis of it. But no, it's all mainstream media on the left that's just attacking Trump. Well, that's not going to give me any trust in YouTube or Google as well, because now you can see the gears behind the machine that are manipulating the algorithm, maybe internally in Google, I don't know, to use it as a cudgel to attack Trump when the topic is Epstein. Now, and it turns out that Trump is in it, but is very little on Trump in it. And I guess because that was so long ago and they had a falling out decades ago. So there's not much in there. I don't know, as the world got more and more digitized, maybe there was stuff, but it's gotten lost. I have no idea. Or maybe there's just not very much. But the fact that I can't search in the largest number one and two search engine in the world and just get what is happening about, because there's so many independent vloggers like this that are doing analyses of what's in the Epstein file. But no, I have this opaque do not enter the sign in front of me if I try to search for it. And then if you go to search it in Google, try searching Jeffrey Epstein in Google. And you know what's interesting? Click on, there's the search bar and then there's image bar and maps and all that sort of stuff. Type in Jeffrey Epstein or Epstein files in Google and click on image. What do you get? You get pictures of Trump. The first 3 pages is just pictures of Trump and Epstein, Trump and Epstein. They hated each other for the past 15 years. Why am I only seeing Trump? Everything is Trump, 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 Trump. It is delusional how the algorithms have been manipulated. So you can't even research things. This is why I haven't used Google in years because of that. I went to this Google phone for this stream for pragmatic purposes, but I can't wait to go back to Apple for that reason. It is so deceptive in how things are curated for you. And it's crazy making. This is why people are getting so nuts, because they can't even search what they know is true, or they're just curious about. They can't even search for it. It is a form of intentional censorship. They're trying to censor your mind, which is crazy. Right? It's absolutely nuts. Anyways, so Trump and him, they grew to hate each other over time. The things that that I found about Trump, I'm not going to get into the details. You can all find it there. But the things that were embarrassing about Trump, yeah, maybe 1 or 2 things that would be embarrassing if you can be embarrassed. Which this is something I and Scott Adams aligned on. I can't be embarrassed. There's nothing you can say that embarrassed me. Confidence gets in the way, apparently. I don't really care. People say, okay, yeah, whatever. It doesn't bother me. I don't care what people think about me is none of my business, right? So if you're one of those people who can be embarrassed, then I guess you'd say things about Trump, yeah, it might be mildly embarrassing. It also seems to stem back decades. And who knows? I mean, we are different people every 10 years, right? Every cell in our body has been replaced every decade. Are you the same person you were 20 years ago? I know I'm not. We all change. We all evolve. So anyways, it's interesting. And you go see this on Bluesky as well. You type in the you type in the Epstein files, and what do you see? It's all Trump. The Tesla takedown it's all Elon and all Trump, right? They completely ignore that their hero, Bill Gates, seems to be kind of the one who comes off the worst. What a weasel. Oh my God. It's I almost feel bad for him, actually. I really, and that explains, his divorce and all that sort of stuff. And I don't wish any of that on anybody. And I'm going to explain that in the second section. And then there's somebody who I do like, who I mentioned in, I think, the last stream, which is Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And Howard Lutnick just seemed to have email communications. It seemed to be all there really was, him and his wife. And that in itself is, I mean, who knows? That in itself doesn't impugn any sort of guilt. The problem was Howard Lutnick told this story in an interview how he met him once, he realized he was disgusting instantly and never spoke to him. So, okay, now that was completely deceptive and fake and completely false. But at the same time, like I've done media scrums, like when you do media interviews or whatever, like you talk about loaded questions. It is an experience I wish everybody would go through, being questioned by the media and being in a scrum. It's all accusations in the form of a question. Everything they send you is an accusation. So I'm sympathetic to Howard Lutnick in that situation of what's he going to say? What's he going to say in that scenario? They throw an accusation at him in the form of a question. What's he going to say? You know what? I met the guy once. He was a POS. I'm not interested. And that's it. What's he going to say? Yeah, we emailed back and forth. We were maybe going to go to his island, but we never did. And that's why. Then they're like, oh, really? You never did? Oh, but what do you think about a list of assertions and attacks to follow? So it's his way of just ending it. So I'm sympathetic to that. And I understand why they did it. And it seems to be they all knew he had the best sex parties in the world. But he was also a billionaire donor. He was very well connected. He gave money to people to projects all over the world, not just NGOs and stuff. So he really knew how to work that class of people. Unfortunately, he was just friggin' evil, which is what we're learning, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And what's wild is the pictures with Steve Bannon, which is the thumbnail for this, because Steve Bannon built his political career on the framing of left right. The left is evil. The left is all evil. Left, 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 left. Communist, left, left, left. Okay, fine. I agree. I agree. But Jeffrey Epstein was a leftist, and which is what we'll talk about, which people are missing about Epstein. We'll talk about the next episode because it's important, relevant to Israel. He was an ultra leftist. So why is Steve Bannon regularly meeting with this ultra leftist? What were they talking about? Why was he there? Because that's how the world really works. When you're in that club of the 2,500 billionaires and the people who are hundreds of millionaires and whatever, you live in a world where there's all sorts of people who always trying to get things from you. And somebody I know once in that class, he said to me, and I felt bad for him. He said, and this guy's super wealthy, like Jeffrey Epstein type wealthy. And he said to me, you know how many times a day, or sorry, how many times a year, I think he said, where I get people hounding me for $1 million or more. Like I just have $1 million lying around here. And he said, and it's always for good causes. And it tugs at my heartstrings because it's something that's very important to him. By the way, it's healthcare. And there, I'm constantly, he said, how often do you think I get these messages that make me feel so guilt ridden that I just can't sleep at night because I think I need to give them $1 million, but I can't afford to give everybody $1 million. He said, how often do you think I get those messages? And this guy never swears. And I said, I don't know. He said, every fucking day. And you could tell, like it gutted him emotionally that he's always tied, that there's always people after his money. And by the way, we saw that in the trucker convoy. That's why I was familiar with what was happening, because I've seen it through people like their eyes. And this is why I've never been like, I've never really chased money. Because I can see the world that they live in. And that's what happened in the trucker convoy. You know how many interviews or requests for interviews I got? All they cared about was the money. That's all they cared about. The media, that's all they cared about is the money. Where's the money? How much money? Whose money? Because everybody wanted a piece of it from themselves. I didn't. And this is what me and some of the others I thought agreed upon. It's for the truckers, for the guys outside. They'll figure out how to distribute it. My goal is messaging and just to keep things positive. But yes, the media, political class, all they cared about was the money. So that's a little bit how that class works. and some of the pressures that they're under. And it's really interesting that, you see people, they always fantasize oh, it'd be great if I was rich and all that sort of stuff. No, 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 you won't. No, you don't. Trust me, your life is so much better the more simple it is. I remember, I don't want to give too much detail with this, but I was in a meeting with somebody in Florida, of a friend, and this was in 2008. And this particular, so everybody's bleeding financially. All my friends are upside down on their houses. People are going bankrupt. Florida was particularly hit hard at that point, right? And so we went for drinks with somebody, a friend of a friend, and this guy as well, very, very wealthy, which is not uncommon in Florida. And he was really stressed. And my friend said to him, What's the matter? Are you okay?" And he said, his friends like mocked him, said, "Do you not see what's going on in the news?" And my friend just kind of, he's a buddy, so kind of pokes him a little bit, says, "Yeah, but you're very wealthy. You're going to be okay. Everyone else is suffering." He says, "What, are you crazy?" He said, "Let me teach you something about being wealthy. We all have the same problems. The difference is, in my case, it's just bigger numbers, which means bigger risk and liability." And he said this particular person was a property owner, owns property all over the world. He said, "I can handle," I can't remember the numbers that he gave. I'm gonna make them up, but you'll get the point. Okay. He said, he said, "I can handle having a 20% vacancy. I can survive that. I can't handle a 50 or 60% vacancy on my commercial properties." He said, "Right now, I am now wasting $30 million a month. How long do you think I can go on like that until I go bankrupt?" And then you say, "Okay, well, I'll just sell some of my properties." Yeah, at a loss, or they're mortgaged. Like and by the way, those properties have now collapsed in value. So I can't really sell them anyways. I'll be upside down. I'll still have a mortgage on a property I don't even own. So it gets really complex at that level, and you realize the types of pressure that those people are under. And I think Jordan Peterson kind of suggested that a little bit. And I think we would serve ourselves well if we were a little bit more empathetic to people. This is why the whole 1% versus everybody, that's a communist framing of the world, because we all have similar problems, right? I've lived in both worlds. You are spot on. Well, thank you, Maureen. And yeah, there's something about simplicity. Maureen says, "I watched you in those meetings." Oh, well, thank you very much. You're very sweet. So this, I want to get into the last thing on Epstein. We're going way longer than I thought we would. But that is Epstein and conservatives. So this is where the 7 signs of cognitive dissonance come in, and I may see things you dislike or disagree with. I'm trying to call balls and strikes on all sides, because that's how we bring people together. And that's how we make it for people who are maybe more centrist, who may disagree with us on stuff, that they feel comfortable to engage and talk with us on things that we may disagree with, but we want to understand each other's perspectives. I think there's some benefit for them. But I do have criticisms for conservatives as well. So, so just be warning, this might upset some of you, but just hear me out. You may disagree, but just understand my framing and how I come to it. I took a lot of abuse from conservatives while I was actively involved in politics over the years, because I'm socially libertarian or socially liberal. I'm very much the you do you, I do me. Don't do things that are illegal. Try not to be immoral. And I don't want to hear about, your private life. I don't want to, my favorite was Sergio Marchionne, who is just one of the most brilliant CEOs to have ever lived. He was asked on 60 Minutes, "What about your private life?" And he said, "I have a private life, and it's private." That was it. There was no more conversation at that point, right? So, I have mentioned in previous streams the one piece of legislation that would never pass is mandatory drug testing of elected officials or their staffers. You know why? Because so many of them are hardcore drug addicts and alcoholics. And it's always the people who are the most Puritan, the most religious, the most whatever. So many of them are throwing coke up their nose on a regular basis. And I think it comes from being in a position where you're constantly attacked publicly in the media. I can imagine it grinds on you. Not everybody can be like myself or Trump or Scott or other people. We don't care what people's opinions of me are none of my business, right? That's a difficult framing for a lot of people, and I get it. I believe it, right? This is also why Scott Adams often said, and he's right, the word hypocrite is the least persuasive word in the world because so many people live a life of hypocrisy. And it's my favorite quote from Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek: life is an exercise in exceptions. You can't always be consistent, and you see this often. People, I don't know, elected officials, they have one position that I don't want to, emotionally infuse people, but they'll have one position on an issue, and then all of a sudden, their son or daughter gets arrested or something like that. Then all of a sudden, they're completely inconsistent of what they've been saying because there's an emotional bond with their child, and what parent doesn't want to protect their child? So nobody is logically consistent because we're not robots. We're emotional beings, right? And the other thing is I've seen, and some conservatives will get really upset at this, but I'm just telling you honestly, I'm not BSing you, and this is what leans me to being way more socially libertarian, the shocking number of religious conservatives that are closeted homosexuals. Once in a while you see one or two that comes out, and no, it's not all of them, not even close, but there are some. And those are often the ones who are the most aggressive towards people who are just more socially libertarian. Like, you do your life, I do my life. I don't want to hear about your private life. So we see these inconsistencies everywhere, right? This is how the human being operating system works. There's a name for the human operating system. It's called human nature. And in these Epstein files, you're seeing, the dark aspects of human nature when things just get way too out of control, right? We've convinced ourselves that we have willpower, that we can resist urges. Some people can, but, well, some people can in context with the right support. But you tell me why that bag of Doritos that's in the fridge, or sorry, that's in the closet, that you're never supposed to touch ever, just went missing one late night. I thought you have free will and you have willpower. That's just how we are. It's our environment is going to kind of infer our behavior a lot more than we realize. And I think that's what lends itself to the Jeffrey Epstein story that people are not talking about. And I think conservatism fails to understand this. Conservatism believes that people have absolute free will. Sorry, that's just a fantasy. You have to build systems and structures around you that allow you to be a more Puritan life. That's what the church does. That's why they say you should go to church and spend time with church people and whatever, because you're trying to artificially, not for everybody, but for some people, to suppress human nature. And we all have human nature to varying degrees, right? Um, and I don't know that suppression is necessarily helpful for many people. Some people, I guess it is. Some people, it's not. Again, you do you, I do me. But unfortunately, the lifestyle of Jeffrey Epstein, he's not the only one. Newsflash, there's lots of Jeffrey Epsteins in the world. And it's fascinating that people in the Western world obsess over Jeffrey Epstein. Go live in South America for a little bit. Go get to know the business culture and the political culture and the influential people there. I think we're very naive in the Western world. I think we are obsessed with sexual puritanism. I don't understand where that comes from. I think that is counterintuitive to human nature. You may not like it, but that's just the way we are. France is a good example, right? France is famously known for their culture around this issue. I think France is just more honest. They're just more honest with human nature, that we have some, to varying degrees, different dark aspects to all of our nature, and we all try to keep it uh, under control. Well, how does it slip out of control? And I think this is the Epstein story. One of the things I've noticed is, when you know people who are of that economic class, there are some people, and I think Steve Jobs talked about this too. There's when you can have anything you want, when you can buy, purchase, whatever, anything you want, it makes you a little crazy. And you can see this often with people who get obsessed with, they want the one-off car. They want the one piece of art that no one has, and then they put it in a collection where no one can see it. They get obsessed with having something that nobody else can have, because when you can purchase anything, all of a sudden I think it plays with the wiring of the human operating system for desire. It's very important, I think, for human beings to have things that are not obtainable. This is where music and art is so important. I cannot buy myself better skills at playing the cello or playing the piano. I have to practice that. I can't purchase that. I think that's why music or the arts is so important to people on the left, usually, without them understanding why. I think it helps ground people. It's a hedge against this phenomenon that if you can buy anything, it makes you a little bit crazy, unless you have something that there's no amount of money where you can buy the skill. And I think that's very healthy, right? And I think that is the Epstein phenomenon. Once you get to that level, you can buy anything, you know every politician in the world, you're at the top, you're at the top tier of understanding how the world really works, whether you're evil or not, which he clearly was. I think that's what lends itself to being making you a little crazy. And add to the fact that this math protege, who might have been a little bit on the spectrum and didn't understand people, which I think he ended up learning to understand people much more than people realize. I'll get to that in a second. I think it just made him crazy. I think that's might have been what happened. I could be completely wrong in this analysis. I'm open to somebody telling me I'm wrong. But that's just kind of how I see it, because I've seen it in other people. And again, this is the phenomenon that Steve Jobs famously talked about. One of the things that's interesting, I saw in this analysis earlier today, that Epstein apparently, and this goes to his communication skill, which will be related to the next podcast when I talk about Epstein and Israel. He had nude art all over his house, predominantly women, but not exclusively. So you are a regular person, you're a, I don't know, an NGO, you have a whatever cause that you're trying to fund. You find out this guy is a big donor, knows everybody, knows presidents, and he's interested and wants to meet with you. Well, who's going to turn that down, right? Oh, he was convicted of sexual crimes. Like, okay, maybe I'll just be careful, but let me go meet with him and see if he'll donate to us because I'm desperate, which often happens, right? Uh, Maureen. Okay, Maureen, you're amazing. She says I used to use Playboy books for referencing when doing life drawing. That's amazing. Cool. Oh, so you're an artist. That's very awesome. We should talk more. Because art is very important. And I think conservatives are starting to learn that, how it's important for shaping who we are and hedging against some of this behavior. So, anyways, Epstein apparently had nude art all over his house. Why did he do that? Why would you like have it open in the main foyer of your house, all this sort of nude art, when you're going to bring, people are from NGOs, respectable people, presidents, and all that sort of stuff. And Lundich told this story, but now we don't know if it could be completely fabricated. He said when he walked in the house, there was a massage table in the middle of the house. Apparently, that was part of his mental illness, we think. He had this obsession with massages. Really weird. And we can all take guesses where that came from, but he had this just crazy obsession with getting massages, and which kind of, I guess, led him down this path. But when I hear that he's got all the nude art in his house, he may or may not have had massage tables in the middle of his house, who knows? And he was engaged in what he was doing. I think there's two things that happen. First, I think he's read Robert Cialdini's Persuasion, which is the book after Influence. That is a persuasion set that if you walk into somebody's house and or there's all this, nude art or explicit art, they're now already primed to have conversations around that topic. I think, yeah, he might have been very socially awkward. I think he was studying how to manipulate people socially that he probably knew he was socially awkward. Why? Because very, very smart. He's not a wasn't dumb. Might have been evil, but he wasn't dumb. And then the other part is, things get out of control. It's we talk about riding the dragon. When people get into something, they get a big business, they're successful, or they, you see the celebrities, all of a sudden they go from being one independent person to a massive corporation. And, or a good example is Mark Zuckerberg riding the dragon when Facebook just exploded and he seemed to be struggling how to keep it together. I think, and this is my filter from living in Latin America and understanding Latin American culture around this sort of stuff. I think that, remember we started, he was a financial bounty hunter. Well, if you're a bounty hunter, much like all like law enforcement, investigators, whatever, you need an in to get to people. You need to have some way to walk in the door to figure out if you're investigating somebody for fraud and you want to be able to prove it, you need an in. That's what the girls were. I think the girls were the honey traps. And the girls were apparently they're orphans or didn't have parents or whatever. So there's no liability for him. It's certainly better than selling chiclets on the corner street in Mexico City and then ending up in prostitution by the age of 14 and dead by the age of 20. Now, all of a sudden, these girls, they come to America. They're living in a big house with a rich guy. They're talking to the wealthiest people in the world that they were working with him. Because there is a lot of that in Latin America. A lot. A lot. This is how narcos operate. This is how the narco terrorism network flourishes, using girls who are working within the system. They're called Black Widows. And I think that's exactly what was happening. I could be wrong, but it seems to fit. So was he evil? Yes. Yes, he was very dark and he was very evil. I think he just went crazy over years. I might be wrong. I'm not a psychologist, but I think it's something to consider that things are way more complex than we often lead to be. Like there's this desire amongst human beings, part of our operating system. We want magic answers. I asked an intelligence officer once this a long time ago, because they deal with this sort of stuff when they're in different regions and they're dealing with, ethnic conflict, one tribe versus another tribe. And I remember asking him, what's with all the Jewish conspiracy stuff? Where does that come from? And he said, oh, we know exactly where it comes from. Like, okay, well, what drives it? He said, we live in a very complex world. And some people, many people, I mean, it's a natural bias of us, we want simplistic answers for a complex world. And when you start to give them, here are 30 different pieces that are all interlinked and they operate sometimes independently, sometimes together. And these are the competing forces that are trying to assert themselves and try to better their economic state, better their businesses, better whatever. The world just becomes too complex for some people. They say, no, no, no. And it's just, I need one answer. One magic answer solves all my problems. And if people just get frustrated with the complexity, they don't have enough background to understand how the world works. So somebody comes along and says, I got it. I know what it is. It's the juice. Okay. Then you go, if I just fix this problem, then all my problems go away. And that's not how the world works. The world is a complex machine of Dilbert filters and competing interests and all sorts of people who have various different incentives. And often you can never understand what those incentives are. And I think that's why you see some of the narratives around what's going on with Epstein. Epstein was evil. Was he born evil? No, I don't know. I don't know. He might have just been crazy. He might have been a psychopath, or he just might have been made crazy his entire life. What I do think is it's not advantageous there are people that, emailed back and forth with Epstein and like, oh, they're a sex criminal because they emailed him. Yeah, maybe they're just looking for money for an investment or they're looking for money for an NGO. And they're like, yeah, he's a piece of crap, but he's got money. Because there's a lot of people, because most of you would take that opportunity as well, because that would just be good business. That's just how it is. So I think I will end all the Epstein there. Next time, I promise, we'll talk a little bit more because I missed some of the points here, and we'll go over some of the things I skipped over because we're running short on time. And we will talk about Epstein in Israel. And I'm willing to bet it's not what you think it is. But we'll see. Maybe some of you know. But I think being sympathetic to people that are in different socioeconomic situations and understanding we all have common pressures, I think that does a lot for bringing us together to understand that life is not easy for anybody. And I remember this other really wealthy guy, his kid got LASIK. I think it was the early days. Lost his eyesight. There's no amount of money that he could pay to get his child their eyesight back. That's just done. So money only does so much for you, right? So I hope, we can look at all of this stuff and understand that unfortunately we may not like it with this Epstein situation. That is how most of the world works. I'm sorry. It really is. If you understand, if you've ever met people in organized crime, narcotraficantes in South America, the exploitive nature of, look at Afghanistan and overseas. Like, the world is a mess. The challenge is to be the good person. And nobody is going to be morally pure 100%. Everybody's got vices. For some people, it's women. For some people, it's alcohol or whatever. Some people, it's spending too much money and whatever. Everybody's got some sort of vice. But if you're sympathetic and you understand, we all have some sort of vice that we try to manage. And as long as people understand that and they try to be relatively moral, okay, you want to create problems in your private life. That's fine. Just keep it to yourself and try to be moral. And I think if we do that, then we're going to be a lot better as a society and just try to understand each other. I do feel for some of the people who are going to be probably targeted, who may not be deserving of this just because they were emailing a guy because they thought he was a lead on investment money. I think there's a lot of that. Stanley, well, thank you very much, Stanley. Enjoyed this. I saw you on the Scott Adams School with Erica. Erica's amazing. Erica and co. Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to do this Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm trying not to cross over with them too much, but I can't start too late. Today, start a little bit later. And maybe I'll go back on with them sometime soon. We talked a little bit about them. And that's the Scott Adams School. For people who don't know, that's formerly Scott Adams' YouTube channel and live stream and locals. And he is severely missed by many of him. Wish we could have his insight to what's going on right now. There's some of us who understand his framing and his training and why he came to some of the conclusions that he had. So we'll do our best, but nobody's going to do him any justice. So thank you, Stanley. I appreciate it. Maureen, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear we have another artist here. Um, that's something that's missing on the conservative side of things, but maybe we can do something to change that. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, usually at 10:30. I guess you're on the West Coast. Yeah. Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 7:30 Pacific time, 10:30 Eastern time. And we'll see what happens at the end of March, April. I might even step it up from 3 days as my schedule is changing and my life is in flux. So I love you all. Please be kind to people. And I always tell people, be kind to strangers. It really does a lot for your subconscious and your confidence. When you go into the gas bar and you just actually strike up a conversation with the poor guy who's working there 16 hours a day and nobody gives him any sort of attention, you'll change their life for the day and you'll feel much better about yourself. So please try to do that as much as possible and be kind and tip your waiters and waitresses, please. Scott was 2 months older than I am. Yeah, that's got to be, we all start to question, how much time we have on this earth when we see people that we care about had their lives ended prematurely. But let's focus on all the good stuff. We're here today. We'll be here tomorrow, and I will be here with you next Friday morning. And please like, share, subscribe, share to others. And if you disagree with me, great. Don't call me an SOB. Just tell me why you disagree, and I'll consider it, and I'll consider your opinions. And maybe you'll change my mind. Maybe I'll change your mind, or maybe we'll just have this fun exercise of talking to each other. All right, I gotta run. You're all the best, and have an amazing day. And God bless. We'll talk to you soon.